if you take the 20 top industrial countries, they're all steadily going up. And then when the financial coup starts in the United States starts to diverge, but it's relatively dropping slowly, but it's not rising with the others. It's just dropping. And then in the pandemic, it falls off the cliff. And it's not, from the numbers I've seen, Denny Rancor up in Canada has done a lot. It's not falling from a virus disease. It's dropping from the vaccines. So you're watch, and if you look at the divergence post-COVID of the 19 countries with the United States, it's clearly a poisoning.
Because that's always an argument when you tell people about this, like especially when you try to tell them like maybe our food isn't that healthy, or maybe our the medicine that we take aren't that good for us. Then like but what you're talking about, because the life expectancy is always like increasing and we're getting older and older and healthier. But like obviously I know it's not true, but it's good to hear like it's really not true.
So I can't tell. I'm much closer to what's going on in the United States. I see what I see in the Netherlands is the food in the store is not as good as it was when I got here. But the quality of the food in the Netherlands is so much higher than the United States. It's very difficult for me to in any way complain, because it's just like, why complain about heaven, right? So the quality of the food here is very, very good. And in Europe, it's particularly Northern Europe, it's much better than in the United States. United States has been falling for some time. Um, but we just did a great interview on the Soleil Report, which we'll publish next week, with Dr. Suzanne Humphreys. And it's called mRNA. Will we ever understand what the mysterious ingredients are? And because if you look at the spray above us, if you look at the food, and you look at the pharmaceuticals, we keep finding these mysterious ingredients. And the question is, what are they, and how do they relate to things like the Internet of Bodies? Because there is an effort, what I believe is there is a concerted effort across all these different areas, and we've seen it in the food too, to get bioengineered particles into our bodies. And that is very, very scary and concerning.
So you think that's already happening through the food, for example?
It certainly is in the United States. And one of the things I will tell you, that's the GMOs and the pesticides are gruesome enough. If you look at what's happening with pesticides in the United States, Bayer is trying to get indemnification state by state and even federally for pesticide makers. So we know how well that worked for vaccine makers, giving them just carte blanche indemnification. They're trying to get that, and the states are having quite a legislative battle as the lobbyists come in and try and get indemnification. So, and it's very, very dangerous, because we know how damaging and harmful the pesticides are. And of course, the reason they want it is they're getting sued. And my feeling is, when you kill people, you should get sued.
So, at least that.
So I'm a great believer, if there's a death penalty, here are corporations and here are humans. If a human kills another human, death penalty. In America, if a corporation kills humans, no death penalty. They simply give a percent of the profits to the Department of Justice and go on killing.
Which they already calculated to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm a great believer that, for example, states have the ability to pull the license to operate. I think if a company is intentionally killing people, they ought to have their license to operate killed.
Do you think that the companies are intentionally killing people?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, some companies, are not intentionally killing people, but they run dangerous businesses. The oil business is a difficult, dangerous business, and they, from what I've seen, the oil companies work very hard to do as much as they can for safety, but you have accidents, people die. So I'm not talking about that. Great companies make mistakes. They're human systems, and death happens, and that's understandable. But there are companies that absolutely, they're serial killers. And that's the problem I have, when I want to look at say, if you look at sort of the discussion in the United States about reforming pharma. My attitude is it's like reforming the Russian mob. Are you kidding me? We're not gonna, there's a point at which there's a point of no return. And, these companies, in my experience, I mean, if you look at what Pfizer did, my my assessment of that is it's serial killing. I mean, you don't come back from mass atrocity, right? You don't reform. I mean, what do you do? What do you do with a serial killer? You put them in prison for life, or or you give them the death penalty. But you don't think you can reform them and let them keep running around. What's hard about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always hard to imagine, like, on which level they know about the evil that they're doing.
They absolutely know. It's, something, I've run large enterprises. I've run private companies. I've run government agencies. It's hard to engineer a mass atrocity. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of planning. You got to put stuff in the vials. You got to run. I mean, this is a big job. You can't just do this by accident. Do you know what I mean? This is not like a spontaneous combustion. This is a major, major operation. So,
Yeah.
But it was also, it's been clear in the United States. Debbie Learman just published a book called The Deep State Goes Viral. And she does a remarkable job, as did Catherine Watt, of proving this is a military intelligence operation. This operation was won by the military, and Pfizer absolutely had permission, to not meet any of the FDA requirements. Yeah, so there was a whistleblower who brought a whistleblower suit that lost because they said, the government wasn't defrauded. The government ran the fraud. That was the judge saying, no, the government wasn't defrauded. They were in charge of the fraud. They approved the fraud. This was an engineered fraud.
Can you tell a bit more about the Internet of Bodies? Because it's like a wild conspiracy in a way, but...
No, go to Purdue Engineering.
Oh, yeah?
Go to Purdue School of Engineering. They have a whole section of their website on the Internet of Bodies. This is a major venture capital niche.
And that's where Kennedy comes in with his wearables.
Yeah. He just nominated as the Surgeon General of the United States someone who's never practiced medicine, but has a wearable company that wants to stick a wire under your skin to track you. Right?
Yeah.
What about this is we don't, this is like a livestock tagging system. I mean, I live in a farming community in the United States, and the thing that really helped me understand the control grid is I spent a lot of time around farmers, understanding how they do livestock management. I started reading livestock management articles and magazines, and really studying livestock management. And if you study livestock management, it's perfectly clear what they're doing.
It's funny that you say this, because I last couple of years I've been thinking a lot about this as well. And actually the way that we treat our dogs, because almost everyone owns a dog, so we know how we treat our dogs, like with vaccines when they are super young, getting chips in their body so we can track where they are, etc., etc. That's exactly the same how the elite treats us as well. Right? That's so insane when you think about it. Yeah.
I've spent a lot of time watching the elite, when I was still inside, watching the guys at the very top get frustrated. Because, one of the reasons they got frustrated was the corruption goes from the very bottom to the very top. And trying to run things clean when everybody, you could never create a political constituency in the United States for financial responsibility. Everybody would always support the criminal. I mean, go back, I told you this before. Remember the story of the crucifixion. Pontius Pilate knows it's bad politics to crucify Jesus. So he offers the crowd, you can let one go, and they choose the criminal, right? And in American campaigning, the criminal's the guy who promises you more free money. And he's the guy who wins. So the corrupt guy, the more corrupt you are, the more you're better at your chances of winning. So, the guys at the top were very, very frustrated. And if you can, and here's what's interesting: the history of investment is the most profitable investment ever was slavery. Slavery is very, very profitable. And the problem with slavery, the last time around it got canceled, they couldn't perfect the collateral and they couldn't put down the Haitian rebellion. Now, with the Palantir system, you can put down the rebellion, and with chipping, you can perfect the collateral, which means if I'm a bank and Kennedy's got every one of the American people into a wearable, I can track, I can finance you at a 50% loan to value. And if you move states, I can identify, okay, you're my collateral. You can't beat the collateral system. So it solves the problems that they had with slavery historically. So and we know from the sex slave and child trafficking that the people who run the planet believe in slavery. Right? So
Aren't we already slaves?
I don't think so.
No? In a way, financially?
So there's a continuum of totally free to
Totally enslaved.
totally slave.
Yeah.
And if you look at where we are on the continuum and where they want to go, these are the good times. So enjoy it. Okay. And fight, because I'm not going there, and I'm telling you, death is not the worst thing that can happen. So you need to appreciate where we are.
Mm. Can you tell us a bit more? Because, I mean, the Palantir thing was quite a lot in the news the last couple of weeks, I think. So it seems like people getting also a little bit more aware of it as well, especially people who thought that Trump was on their side and Trump will be the savior of everything and everyone. It seems like with the whole Palantir thing coming a little bit more up, people are getting, well, at least a little bit more known about it.
So every 4 years, America goes through this madness where they waste a whole lot of time on the presidential campaign thinking it's going to make a difference, and they proceed to not spend time on the things that will make a difference. It's pretty tragic. But it it seems to work for everybody. It's very entertaining. It's a form of theater, but you had a lot of people who, and I give a lot of credit to the entrainment technology because, if you look at what Trump did in his first administration, why anybody thought that this guy would protect them from the control grid, I can't. I mean, he shut down 35% of the small businesses in America. He almost destroyed Main Street. So what?
You mean during COVID?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those policies had nothing to do with medical science or health. They were straight military. We're going to shut down the economy. So the Fed injects $5 trillion and you offset that inflation by shutting down Main Street. And then the guys who get the $5 trillion can suck up and buy the assets of the guys who got shut down. I mean, what's not obvious about that? Okay. So why anybody thought now, one of the things we all like about Trump is that he got rid of there's a whole world of what's DEI and ESG and deeply offensive cultural stuff that is destroying our society and destroying our productivity. And so he got, he's basically anti those things. He's against pretending that women are men and pretending men are women, all that kind of stuff. So all that kind of I don't know, is there one word to describe it all?
Chaos.
Yeah, so
Weirdness.
chaos tactics.
Yeah.
Cultural chaos. So he blew out the cultural chaos and he returned Christmas to us, okay? And so there's a slice of what we all appreciate about Trump is that he got rid of all that stuff. So and we're still working it out of the American system. And every time another corporate DEI officer gets fired, everybody cheers, and it's deeply gratifying. So so that's the one thing he has done. But when it comes to putting into place the nuts and bolts of the control grid, he's working at remarkable speed. His whole team is, and Kennedy's the perfect example of that. He wants everybody. I mean, it's enough that we're all carrying around smartphones, which are, um, you know, it's a we're carrying our tracking and surveillance devices around with us. So
Yeah, that's it. That's what I was thinking about as well. Is like you almost don't even need a chip when everyone is always bringing their phone, right? I mean, you need it for the next step, but
right, but getting it in their body gives you much more ability, I believe, to influence their mind and control them, or kill them if you don't want them around. Is my guess.
so. And do you think that we already getting those chemicals or those like the stuff that they need for the Internet of Bodies that we are already getting it in through the food and the vaccines?
So it's clearly in the vaccines. Um, the only analysis I have of spray that confirms that it is the United States. So we just did an interview with Clifford Carnicom. Elsa von Hemlin did it. Very good interview. And what Clifford, he's been studying it for decades. And what he says is the bioengineered synthetic material in the spray is the same material as in the injections. So he's saying the mysterious ingredients in both the spray and the injections are one and the same stuff. So
So then, where are we now when you have the scale from like say totally free and totally enslaved? At what like where on the scale are we at this moment? Do you think?
well, if you look at implementing the control grid, I think we are 2 to 5 years away from it completely being implemented and locked down if we don't stop it. But I think it's back to the S curve dynamic. The extent to which you feel your freedom impinged on is going to increase radically over the next 3 to 5 years. And it's most people who've lived in the Western world cannot fathom what is planned. They cannot fathom, that when I'll tell them, okay, well, this will give them the ability to control what your credit card can buy or not buy. And I try to explain the fact that this is not some system of rules. The AI and software create a rule set just for you. So control and slavery happen one person at a time. And what I extract from you and your family is totally different what I extract from him and his family. It's a very custom, one by one person system. They can't fathom that that can happen here. They can't fathom that what that world is like. Because they'll say, "Well, I have nothing to hide," and or I have no assets. They take my assets. I have no assets. And I say, "You have children. What if they take your children?"
They're already that far that we already almost don't own any assets anymore, except for the children, obviously. But right?
We people still own a lot of assets,
Mm.
and and there's a inheritance process when as the boomers die. There's a huge amount of assets that can move down. If it doesn't move down and it moves, into the government or private investors, that's an enormous amount of family wealth that is destroyed.
That's why they're taxing it that hard, or at least in the Netherlands, they're going to tax it even
Yeah,
harder now. The
yeah,
inheritance, well, what you earn of that.
right, right.
Where does like what's Palantir doing in this game?
So I haven't studied Palantir carefully, but from what I can tell, I started watching the Lavender System. The Lavender System is used in Israel. Was used against the Palestinians, and the Economist wrote an article. It was very interesting. It said that the beauty of using or the advantage of using the Lavender system is the software picks the targets, and so no military officer is legally liable if there's a violation of international law.
You can blame the AI.
You can blame the AI. You can blame the software. And there's a very interesting moment last year when Peter Thiel was questioned by students at Cambridge asking about the lavender system, and he kind of melts down because it was almost like he didn't realize, okay, you're going to be held responsible for this in the court of popular opinion. because, this is being used to engineer an extermination, and and people are connecting the dots. So it was kind of interesting, but the latest reports I'm getting from Iran indicate that they've been able, using the SpaceX or the satellite systems. I'm assuming SpaceX is involved, but the satellite systems, um, to extend lavalier across Iran. So when the Israelis attacked on June 13th, they assassinated, I think, 11 leaders. So it was both military leaders and nuclear scientists. And my reports, there's a very interesting report in Un's review on the assassinations, is that they killed them in their homes, with their family, with neighbors. Apparently, they have the Israelis have the 8200 group has a defined group of how far out from the individual you can go. What's an acceptable kill? So it includes families and neighbors. And basically, we now have a war that is operating and can kill on a one person. It can surveil, track, and kill on an individual person one at a time, and that makes for a very different kind of strategy. So it's not just dropping a bomb in a neighborhood. You're talking about anybody who helps engineer the policies you don't like in Iran being targeted and having themselves, their family, and their neighbors killed.
And that's because the satellites, there are so many satellites at the moment in the sky. Obviously, Musk shoot a lot of them into the sky over the past
Right.
couple of years.
Right.
And that way we can track basically everyone everywhere all the time.
Right.
And they're
But
testing
it's
it.
not just in Iran, it's here too. In other words, we're talking about a global system. And it's interesting, there was one clip I'm thinking of using in the second quarter wrap up where Karp, who's the head of Palantir, says, you know, to win at war, we have to have the edge. And the edge is, if you are opposed to us, then we kill you, we kill your family, we kill, and he's very aggressive about this, what I assume is this definition of what's an acceptable kill zone when you're going after one individual. So, it's really changing the rules of war in a very dramatic way. Now, what's interesting is we're in a situation where it has become impossible, since all the parties to the war lie all the time. You have no idea. You get a lot of official announcements, but like the NATO guys say, they're going to spend 5%. You know, that's the headline. What does it mean? Are they really going to do it? I have no idea. Would you believe them?